now we're responsible for everything that we do, and that's the thing that terrifies people. Responsibility. It's one of the ironies of life that so many people are afraid of dying because they don't know, they don't know what's on the other side. They're looking for something permanent. They want this moment right now to last forever. And yet they're afraid of making commitments that last forever. Like some people are terrified of joining the military. Why? Dude, that's like a 4-year, you promised to be there for 4 years. Well, what if I change my mind? Can't. And that's like, oh shit. But they'll think nothing at all of having a child. And then people will say, I'm not gonna join the military because that's 4 years guaranteed. But then they'll think nothing about going off to college and racking up $100,000 in debt. We want permanence, but we're afraid of permanence. We want freedom, but we're terrified by it. We want responsibilities, but we don't want responsibilities. There's this constant paradox going on, which all of it really comes down to this fear of, am I doing the right thing? So then the question becomes, whatever you're doing at this moment, and whatever you're doing at this moment in an hour, and whatever you're doing at this moment a year from now, it's a good question to ask yourself. Is it really the most important thing? Is it worth being the most important thing in my life? Whatever you're doing right now, is it worthy of you? Is it worthy of you? Or are you degrading yourself by putting time into things and spending moments on things that aren't really worthy of you? Especially given how short life is. For myself anyway. I mean, how best to spend that time just inevitably becomes the question, which strikes me something just unspeakably sad in a life so short as ours. Like, we take for granted that we have free will. So somebody actually came by doing nutrition when I not even in the class, and saw this and was asking in what way that condemnation would happen, and then that idea of free will came up, and we kind of take for granted that we have free will. Like, I can choose to stand up or sit down. That was the example I used with her. And we think, well, I can just stand up if I want to, and I can just sit down if I want to. Now, there's a growing number of scientists, researchers who believe that, no, you don't actually have that free will. They believe that free will is actually an illusion. And you can think of it as, let's say, for example, if you're playing like GTA, and you see all the NPCs walking around, and if you were to stop those NPCs and ask them, do you have free will? Let's say they could answer. The idea is that they would say, yeah, I can cross the street, or I can stay on this side of the street, or I can keep bumping into a wall if I want to, because they don't realize that they're actually programmed. They think that they can choose to do whatever they want to do, but it isn't true. It's an illusion. If you think about, for example, this marker, if I were to ask the marker, do you have free will? It would probably say yes. But if I let go of this marker and it falls, gravity took over. Now, it might say, well, that's because I chose to fall. I don't want to float up in the sky. Now, you can start thinking about people like this. If it's true that we are nothing except for just a bundle of chemicals that are kind of bouncing around out in the universe, if it's true that there's no such thing as like spirit or soul, or this like thing we call mind or whatever, if the whole universe is nothing except for physical matter, then that means that at some point there was a bang, and that all matter in the universe was propelled outwards, and everything that we see around us and encounter, including people and ourselves, are nothing more than just a chemical reaction. Then that means the very fact of you even like being conceived and eventually born was just a chemical reaction. And that means that what you do in your life is really just a series of chemical reactions. You're just in that chain of chemical reactions. And you might be able to look at it and say, oh, I chose to do all this. But more and more neuroscientists are saying, no, we don't think that there is such thing as free will. And so if that's the case, it calls a lot of things kind of into question, obviously, like meaning and purpose or whatever. Sartre wrote a book called Nausea. And it's kind of a long story. It's a short book with a long story, but in short, it was just a novel, and in it he was trying to make an argument that we are radically free, because this was a debate that was going on quite a bit in his time and still rages today. Determinism is the idea that you don't have any free will. Of course, free will is the idea that you have free will. There's one in between, which is called soft determinism, which is right. I thought you were going to go with that kind of like, well, some things are determined and some things are not. And that's where kind of a lot of people just settle in that middle point. But again, more and more neuroscientists are arguing, no, we actually are determined without free will. So Sartre writes this book called Nausea, in which he uses the characters to try to make this argument that there is free will. And there's this story of a student at UCLA, a philosophy student, who's embroiled in this discussion with himself, and he's trying to prove that he's radically free, because Sartre believes that you're radically free. There's none of this going on. And that means that you get to kind of do whatever you want to do. And he argues that people who believe in this, in determinism, are believing in it because it gives them a sense of security. Because if I don't have to make all the decisions in my life, well then I'm relieved of the responsibility of having to make decisions. So the student at UCLA is a philosophy student. He wants to prove he's radically free. So, true story. He goes down, buys a gun, goes down to the Santa Monica Pier and shoots somebody in the head. Just a random person, just to prove that he's radically free. Now, this is back in the 80s. I think the guy's still in prison for it. I think it was first-degree murder, no possibility of parole. But you see the irony there. Why did he go and do it? Well, because he read this book, because this debate was going on. One could argue he was determined to do that. It was just it was just a series of chemical reactions that caused him, that led him to go and do this thing that he thinks was an expression of freedom. And so, is that a hand, or are you scratching your head? Please.
Well, I was just questioning.
Yeah.
Could you go more in depth on determinism?
I could. Yeah. What do you want to know about it? Yeah. What do you want to know about it?
Just more in general knowledge on it.
Sure. It's it's a subject that I struggle to talk about just because it's so detailed in order to do it justice. That I've been trying for a couple of years to figure out a way of explaining it in just a few sentences. And I think like today's the closest I've ever really gotten to explaining it in just a few sentences. But the idea behind it is that so there are these two views of the world. Well, I guess two major ones. So you've got, we'll call this physics. These two studies. And then you've got metaphysics. So you've got physics and metaphysics. Physics is kind of what you'd expect it to be. It's the study of all the physical matter that's in the universe. So this marker, this floor, these boots, your body, this podium, this Diet Coke. The idea is that physics argues that that's all that there really is in the universe, the physical matter. So physics is the study of how all physical matter kind of interrelates. It goes from like the Diet Coke bottle all the way up to astronomy and seeing how bodies in the universe, how planets and solar systems and galaxies and the universe itself actually operate. So everything from the most basic all the way up to all of the physical machinations of the universe. And then you've got metaphysics. Metaphysics are things that are not governed by physics. So those are things like morals, ethics, a lot of it religion a lot of times. I'll put an asterisk on that because there are some aspects of religion that might be covered by physics. But anything that's not physical falls under the category of metaphysics. So again, even like ethics, what you should do, what you shouldn't do. So determinism will say that all that exists in the universe is that. There's no such thing as mind, spirit, soul, nothing. All that exists in the universe is physical matter that's in motion. And it's the study of the physical matter and how it interrelates. So if you think about, for example, I'm sure you've heard before the idea that you're made up of stardust. You've heard this before? that all of us have the chemical ingredients of long dead stars that are in our bodies, literally, that were made up of exploded stars, which is a pretty fascinating idea, by the way, if this is true, because then it gives rise to this question, then where does consciousness come from? Because if stars aren't conscious, in other words, they're not aware of themselves, then how are we conscious of ourselves? This whole idea of the ability to perceive the universe around us, again, we take it for granted that that's just the way everything is, but there's no reason for us to be conscious. So consciousness would be like a question of metaphysics, perhaps, but physics would say, oh, you're only conscious because of brain activity. And so even the things that you perceive as being metaphysical only come down to the physical operations of your brain. Why is it that you're able to see the world around you, perceive it, think about it? Like, you ever read and understand what you're doing? You're looking at like shredded trees with ink stamped on them, and you read it and you hallucinate. Think about that. When you read a book and it describes an apple tree, you start to imagine an apple tree. You're hallucinating based off of the ink printings on dead trees. Now you can boil it down that simply, but that's what determinism would say, physics would say. All that exists in the world is physical matter. So you're born, you die, and then nothingness. That's it. No God, no heaven, no hell, no spirit, no soul, nothing, no ghosts, nothing like that. So if all of that is true, then it suggests that we're just this bundle of chemicals. So in other words, 14.5 billion years ago, some matter exploded, went outward at a very fast rate, and then fast forward 14.5 billion years, and here we are talking about it. Make sense? So what that means is that you, as you presently are, actually started 14.5 billion years ago. And for 14.5 billion years, all of the matter that makes up your body, that makes up your friends' bodies, that makes up the world around us, that makes up all of your ideas, as it were even, has been progressing, has brought you to the point that you're sitting here right now. But you couldn't have chosen any of it. It just happened. Any more than the marker can choose not to fall and roll. The reason it's doing that is because I did this. Something outside of it did this. Now, if you were to ask the marker, let's just say it could answer, did you choose to fall and roll? It might just say, yeah, especially if my hand was invisible and it couldn't perceive my hand pushing it in that direction. The things that put us where we are today are invisible hands that are pushing us in directions. You might think like, oh, I've just chosen to sit down, just like the marker thinks it chose to be rolled. But you're not choosing that. You live under an illusion that you've chosen that. And for some people, by the way, that's a really neat idea. Because again, what that means, therefore, is that we're not responsible for anything that happens to us. Now, that question of responsibility is a really big question. Because as we've talked about before, one of the things that gives life meaning and purpose is the willing adoption of a responsibility. To decide, you know what, I'm going to have a family. And by having a family, you've chosen now to take care of that family, which gives you a purpose every single minute of every single day. To wake up and go to work, or to be there to take care of your family, or to get some downtime so that you can be a better parent later on, or whatever. Your whole life is now centered around that one decision. Some people, that's their jobs. Some people, that's their, they try to balance the job and the family life. In other words, it's this pursuit of meaning and purpose. If it turns out that there is no meaning and there is no purpose, but that you're actually just doing what you're doing, not by choice. In other words, you didn't willingly choose the responsibility, but you've just kind of been placed into it. Well, it takes away all desires, it takes away all meaning from life. And all of a sudden you can start to go crazy. Because you're thinking like, I'm just like an NPC? Yeah. And the idea is that everybody is an NPC. Nobody gets to decide for themselves. Even the ideas and thoughts that we have. Which, by the way, many of us, anyway, you can think of this I should probably finish my last sentence before I start a newer, more exciting sentence. You can think of this in a very simple, I guess, simplistic way. You guys remember before you were born, when you were on that character creation screen and you had to choose all of your personal attributes? None of you did that? None of you got to choose how tall you're going to be, or how short you're going to be, or your eye color, or your hair color, or your intelligence, or your family, or what year you be born, or anything. And yet all of those things come together to now shape the direction that we can go in life. You didn't get to choose any of those things, but all of those things are exactly the things that influence how you live. And they influence us at such a level that it's not even just influence, it's deterministic. You think you might believe that you have a really strong grasp on right and wrong because that's the family you were brought up in. And so to us, it's just Tuesday. But the idea that there could be a different set of morality or whatever is odd. We can intellectually say it, but not really understand it. And so because you have a certain view, that now leads you to live in a certain direction. And then because you're going in that direction, you now keep going in that direction, but you never got to experience everything else over here. You never got to choose to. You just are, if this makes sense. So it's a much longer explanation, but I hope it helps a little bit. It doesn't help with meaning and purpose, of course, but hopefully it helps with some understanding. And so if that's the case, again, then that means that the universe at some point is going to die out, and then that's it. Just physical matter. Determinism. Free will is the idea, though, that no, you get to choose. You actually do get to decide. It's like, yeah, you were born with certain parameters. You were born with the physical attributes, the mental attributes, the family you were born into, the time and place into which you were born. But within that context, you can do whatever you want. In fact, what you can do is so broad that for a lot of people, it absolutely scares the hell out of you. So for example, if I were to say, take out 2 sheets of paper and write an essay. Write an essay. I wonder how many of you would sit there and go, dope, all right. I wish I write about, I have an idea. And then you get to work right away on an essay. But most people would have a question. What would be the most obvious question? What do I write about? And I say, you decide. Okay, well, how long does it have to be? As long as it is. Okay, but is it going to be persuasive? Is it going to be informational? Whatever you want, go for it. I bet that many people would never even start the essay, because the idea of having all of that freedom would be so overwhelming. It would just be like, I don't know what to write about. It's too broad. And then some people, if I came in and said, okay, take out 2 sheets of paper, you're going to write an essay on whether or not you agree, with the minimum wage. Your essay has to be 5 paragraphs. First paragraph is going to be an introduction. Start your introduction with an attention getter. It has to be at least 3 sentences, and you end that first paragraph with your thesis. Your next 3 paragraphs are going to be body paragraphs. You're going to begin with a topic sentence, which gives you one reason you believe what you believe, and then you're going to explain it, at least 2 sentences. And you're going to do that for the next 3 paragraphs. And then the last paragraph is your conclusion. I want you to provide a call to action in there. And I wonder how many of us would take down those notes and go, okay, got it, thanks. And you'd get to work on that essay. You follow? 2 very different ways of writing that essay. And the first one can be so overwhelming for people that they just never even start. Some people for the second one will be fired up and go, okay, I can do this. Why? Because the second one you've been told what to do. You have direction. And so you're not responsible for figuring out what to write about. You're barely even responsible for having an opinion, because for the most part, most of us would probably just repeat arguments that we've heard before. In fact, many of us would probably say, I don't really have an opinion one way or the other, but you know what? I know how to bullshit my way through it, so I'm just going to give a reason and an explanation, and a reason and an explanation, and a reason and an explanation, and then a call to action, something that we don't really believe. I believe in fair pay. With our star on our hats. We stay off in the distance. But think of your life like this. When we're little kids, I mean, one of the worst things that you can give to a little kid is too much freedom. Little kids require structure. They need to know that wake up time is this time, bedtime is this time, dinner time is this time. And the more structure that they have, the better off they're going to be. Now, when you try to raise kids with no structure, you get kids who grow up unstructured and unable to complete tasks. It's one of the terrible things you can do. Think about when in most of your classes when you go in and then compare it to this one. This one has some structure in the sense of you walk in and there's usually a quote up there. If it's a block scheduled day, today's a little bit different. But when you come in, you know that there's going to be a quote at the beginning, and then the only question is how long is he going to talk for? And then however much time you have at the end of that, it's like, do your thing, do your work. And then you have that freedom at that time to decide what you're going to do with it. Now think about what it is that we do with that freedom. Now think about what you do with that freedom if your whole life was like that, where it really was just completely open and you realized that you could do whatever you wanted to do. What would you do? And if you remember being little kids and you wanted to be a firefighter or an astronaut or a veterinarian or, I don't know, or you want to work in a cafeteria because you like food. So then you rationalize it and you say, when I grow up, I'm going to work in a cafeteria because I like food. But then in the afternoon, I'm going to be a veterinarian. And then after that, I think probably after that, I'll be a firefighter. And because when you're a little kid, you just think the whole world is so open to you. But then as you grow up, you realize, well, no, I have to make those kinds of decisions. And those are the scary decisions that we have to make. What are you going to be? A firefighter or a veterinarian? Two very different things. And they both take a long time to get trained to do. So if you spend 7 years becoming a veterinarian, then that means you probably can't become a firefighter because the window of becoming that has closed. And that's what's scary to a lot of us. Which of those two things should I do? Firefighter or veterinarian? What if I do the wrong one? Should I go to college or not? Oh my God, what if I do the wrong one? And what if I even choose the wrong college? And there's that perpetual what if. And then if you really stop and think about it, think about the possibilities in your life. They really are, like mind-bogglingly infinite. Right now, you could turn your head left or right. Whichever way you turn your head will change your life in some little tiny way. Should you stand up or sit down? Should you go to the bathroom or not? Should you listen to this or should you not? Should you think about what you're going to have for lunch or not? Every tiny little second of your life is a constant decision. And every single one of those decisions takes you in some direction in life. But the idea is you get to choose. And that's a good thing. You get to choose. But here's the bad thing. You're choosing. They're both good. They're all good and bad. Because if you're choosing them, that means that you're responsible for how things turn out. There's almost something that's relieving when we're told a 5-paragraph essay. Anybody ever used the hand when you were writing your essays in junior high school? And like your introduction, your body, and your conclusion. And then we're told an essay is like a hand. And we're like, huh. Now, later on when someone comes along and says, no hand, do your essay. It's too broad. There's a relief that we get when someone comes along and tells us. There's a reason that when we're little kids we look for the adults, and there's a reason that some adults look for the adults in the room. Because the idea of being free is so just terrifying for a lot of people. Think about it. A lot of people. And that's that condemnation to be free. Because once you're thrown into the world, and he says you're thrown into the world, none of us chose to be in the world, but we're here. But now we're responsible for everything that we do, and that's the thing that terrifies people, responsibility. Responsibility. It's one of the ironies of life that so many people are afraid of dying because they don't know, because they don't know what's on the other side, or they don't want to so they're looking for something permanent. They want this moment right now to last forever. And yet they're afraid of making commitments that last forever. Like some people are terrified of joining the military. Why? Dude, that's like a 4-year, you promised to be there for 4 years. Well, what if I change my mind? Can't. And that's like, oh shit. But they'll think nothing at all of having a child. That's strange. That's strange. Having a child is way bigger of a responsibility and way more permanent and monopolizes way more of your time than joining the military. And then people will say, I'm not going to join the military because that's 4 years guaranteed. But then they'll think nothing about going off to college and racking up $100,000 in debt and guaranteeing a life the next 30 years of paying off that debt and having to do whatever job they can get to pay off that debt. And then so on and so on and so on. So it's a strange thing about us that we want permanence, but we're afraid of permanence. We want freedom, but we're terrified by it. We want responsibilities, but we don't want responsibilities. There's this constant paradox of going on, which all of it really comes down to this fear of, am I doing the right thing? But that kind of assumes that you know what the right thing is. What is the right thing for your life? That's the scary part about it. I'm trying to think of something. No, I probably can't say that to you guys. You think about this, that how fast are we going through space? 67,000 miles an hour? We're traveling through space. I've been talking for 24 minutes, which means that we have traveled almost 30,000 miles through space since I started talking here. Yeah. And we're like, I'm just sitting here. And you think about how much could have happened in that time frame. And as we hurl through space, there's lots of other things hurling through space. You ever see those diagrams of the solar system? And it's all orderly and we're all doing this? That's not what's happening. The solar system is doing this. And all of the planets are doing this. And we're hurling through space at 67,000 miles an hour with other things just going past us. And so, if I were to ask you, what if one of those objects was headed straight for us and we saw it coming? And I probably have asked you this before. In other words, if you knew that an asteroid was going to hit the Earth tomorrow and we had 24 hours to live, I guess I would ask you, let's say that we all got that alert right now. What would you do? How would you live in the next 24 hours? Have I ever talked about that? Here? Yeah. Remember I told you the professor sitting around playing chess with his students? Anybody know the name of that professor? You all know the name of that professor. You should know the name of that professor. Today you should know the name of that professor.
You.
No. No, the second best known professor. It was Sartre. That was his thought experiment. And they asked him, what would you do? What would you do? What would you do? What would you do? And he said, I'd finish this game. The rest of that is mine. The rest of what I told you after that does come from me. That the only thing that's real is this moment. The past is a memory. The future is a hope. All that's real is this moment right now. So whatever you're doing right now is the most important thing in your life. You're not doing it because it's the most important thing. It's the most important thing because you're doing it. If this makes sense. So then the question becomes, whatever you're doing at this moment, and whatever you're doing at this moment in an hour, and whatever you're doing at this moment a year from now, it's a good question to ask yourself. Is it really the most important thing? Is it worth being the most important thing in my life? And it might be, maybe Ryan, you might be thinking, no, but I think maybe being in Paris and looking at the Eiffel Tower would be the most important thing. So, but sometimes in life you have to do things so you can get to those things. So in other words, maybe this moment of preparation is the most important thing because it will get you the other things in life that you want to get, perhaps. But I guess the real question I would ask is, whatever you're doing right now, is it worthy of you? Is it worthy of you? You love yourself enough to understand the value that you have, and is what you're doing right now fulfilling that value? Is it worthy of you? Or are you degrading yourself by putting time into things and spending moments on things that aren't really worthy of you? Especially given how short life is. Because that is, I've mentioned before, is, for myself anyway, how best to spend that time just inevitably becomes the question, which strikes me something just unspeakably sad in a life so short as ours. I'm feeling this today. Found out last night one of my former students, we were friends, was arrested for double murder. He just killed 2 people 2 days ago. The report is that he shot one of them 17 times, which, if you know anything about firearms, that means he had to reload. And they say it's a carjacking. That's a 2012 Kia Forte. That's a weird car to carjack, man. I think there's probably way more to the story than just that. And it's one of the things that trips me out, because I think, my goodness, this dude hit me up. I taught him how to surf. I taught the guy how to surf last year. He hit me up a few months ago because he needed a place to stay. And he had a job and everything. It was just he got kicked out of his place. So I was trying to find him something. I had somebody else staying with me at the time, so I just didn't have room. Finally, when I had some room, I said, dude, do you still need the place? And he said, no, I got it sorted out. And so, he had some things sorted out. But you see that and you just wonder, like, did he have it sorted out though? Because part of the report was somebody was homeless. And now I'm starting to think, like, frick, was this guy homeless? I don't know. And this is a dude, by the way, I've told you guys a story about before in the past. I'll remind you later who this person is. But yeah, I just saw this and I'm thinking, like, how much has this person's life changed in the last 48 hours? A lot. Not as much as the 2 people who were shot and killed. Their lives changed a lot 48 hours ago, in just an instant, at 9:39 p.m. in Barrio Logan. And then I started thinking, like, crap, this is not my first student who's murdered people. What sucks is I get along with all of them. I think we're tight. We still talk today. He's out of prison now. The guy deserved it. But I really did. If I told you the story, you would all nod and go, yeah, he deserved it. He deserved it. But now I just think, like, crap, how many of my students are murdering people? Maybe the school board's right. Maybe I'm a bad influence. Questions? Joking with the last part. Questions, comments, concerns, complaints, criticisms, critiques?